I guess not Tuesday. Is it Thursday? Is it Thursday at 2 p.m.? Hi everyone, it's the ROMKids Show. Nice to see you. Bonus edition. It is the April break here in Ontario, and we decided to do 2 episodes this week for your enjoyment. Hello to everyone who hung out with us on Tuesday for our very dynamic, very chatty dinosaur episode. That was so much fun. What did we do? We did something fun. I can remember that. Oh yeah, we did trace fossils, which was really cool. We learned all about what makes a dinosaur, and we talked about trace fossils and made one using dinosaur toys and salt dough. That was so cool. I loved all the questions we got. It was my first solo episode in a while, so it was really, really fun to hang out with y'all. Today, on Thursday, the special edition, never done before Thursday episode. We are talking about all the ways the world explodes, okay? We're talking geysers, we're talking mud volcanoes, which I found out was a thing 1 week ago. We are talking about volcanoes in all of the amazing ways that the earth erupts. We're going to talk about some current events as well. We're going to do not 1, not 2, not 3 experiments. We're doing 4 eruption experiments today. So get ready for that. 4 different ways to make your household messy. So make sure you're doing all these things in a safe space where you're allowed to get messy. I'll hit you up with everything you need in a second. And we're joined by Geologist Veronica Di Cecco. Back-to-back weeks she's been on our show. She was with us last week as well, talking all about crystals, where we also made this sweet, sweet, sweet sugar crystal, okay? So check that out. Again, my name is Kieran Mukherjee. I'm the camp director at the Royal Ontario Museum. I run all of our kids camps in the ROMKids Show, normally Tuesdays at 2 on Instagram, and also up on YouTube is our distance learning initiative to hang out with y'all. Just Google ROMKids Show, and you'll find over 30 episodes with so many ROM experts, so many amazing themes, and so many activities for you to do. And with that, I think it's ready to do the theme song portion of the event. Here we go. Welcome to the ROMKids Show with me. We'll do some crafts and tell some stories. Let's talk about science, art, and history. Welcome to the ROMKids Show, starring you and me. There we go. That's the theme song portion of the event. Time to move over to the art table. I hope you're getting all of your questions ready for volcanoes today, because we actually have an expert this time, so very excited to hang out with you all. Volcanoes. Remy's here. Hey, what's going on? Kieran's here. Welcome, welcome. And Kita's here, and thank you. I like my socks as well. I chose them because they are red and pink, sort of like magma and lava. So very excited. I just want to highlight very quickly for everyone at home that the ROM is doing this really cool project where you can have your artwork, your poems, your creative pieces on display inside the Royal Ontario Museum. It's called My Pandemic Story, and it's all about, you know, the different feelings that you felt, your experiences. We've all felt a lot of heartache and isolation, but maybe there's been a little bit of joy as well. Certainly doing the ROMKids Show has been my piece, my spark of joy during this otherwise very confusing and tumultuous year. So if you have an art project, it's for 4-year-olds to 18-year-olds, Google My Pandemic Story, Royal Ontario Museum, and you can learn how you can submit your art to maybe be on display at the Royal Ontario Museum this fall. I'm really excited about that project. Mylan, hey, what's going on, friend? So many friends here with us today. I'm just getting my little script ready, and I'm about to introduce our very, very special guest on for the 3rd time. Geologist, Veronica Di Cecco, welcome back to the show.
Hello, thanks for having me back.
We've had so much fun talking with Veronica over the last couple of months. We did our meteorites, meteor wrong episode, and we learned all about density. That was really cool. Last week we learned about crystals, minerals, and rocks. That was really cool. So we're so excited to have you on again to to talk about all the ways that the ROM explodes, that the world explodes. Now, when we were getting ready for this episode, you said something really, really cool that I know all of our friends want to hear about. You've been inside a volcano.
I have been inside of a volcano.
Tell me more.
It was amazing, and it wasn't full of magma at the time, is the reason why I was able to go inside.
That's so...
So there's this really cool place in Iceland that you actually go down into a volcano on a window cleaning elevator. So everybody can go down inside of it. It's really accessible. And it's an empty, dormant volcano. So the magma chamber is all empty, not full of magma. And you can explore and see all the different rock layers against the side of the wall and look up at the ceiling and see through the crater. It's really cool.
I like how you called it an accessible volcano. And if we can make
Very
our volcanoes accessible, we should be able to make all of our institutions accessible as well. Viv and Nora, nice to see you back here in the chat as well. Good to see you. Wow, Veronica, geologist, been inside a volcano. You know that you can trust these facts that we're about to throw at you today because of her experience. We're doing 4 eruptions today, okay? We are doing a lemon eruption. We are doing the classic baking soda and vinegar eruption. We will be making elephant toothpaste. And then, of course, we're going to wrap it up in the bathroom doing our Coke and Mentos experiment. So the first thing, Veronica, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to explain what you need to do our lemon volcano experiment, okay? So you need a lemon. You need some baking soda right here. You're going to need a knife, so you're going to require adult supervision, support, and help. We only get to do science experiments if we can do them safely, okay? So you'll need that. And then some food coloring as well. I don't have red food coloring, and this is like the volcano episode. I should know better. And then a spoon, okay? So grab all those things, and then the first step you're going to do is you are going to cut off the top, which I'll demonstrate, and you're just going to cut up a little bit from the bottom so that it can stand straight, all right? But we're going to dive into our discussion about volcanoes with Veronica. Please tell me, what is a volcano?
So a volcano is really an eruption of either magma or some kind of pyroclastic material coming from deep inside the earth to the surface. It doesn't have to be molten rock. Sometimes it can be ash and debris, and they can be really calm and slow flowing, or they can be really violent and fast erupting.
Okay, and we're gonna dive into fast throwing and relaxed volcanoes and dangerous volcanoes in a little bit. Now, there's a big word that I want us to talk about, and I'm hoping that you can explain, because as a geologist, you know what this is. Can you back us up a bit and tell us what plate tectonics are?
Right. So plate tectonics is this very important theory in how the Earth works. And what's really cool for Toronto fans is this idea was kind of pioneered by a prof at the University of Toronto back in the 60s, where there are plates that are moving around the surface of the Earth, and how they interact with each other. Sometimes they collide into each other, sometimes they merge into each other and one goes under the other. This is a dynamic mechanism on our planet that changes how the morphology of our Earth looks, and fuels things like volcanic eruptions and various Earth processes that we see every day.
Okay, so one of the ways that we like to describe plate tectonics is you can do it with your hand. You can do a little demonstration, right? You can take your hand, right, and then when the plates hit each other, one will go below and one can go up.
Right.
And it's during these events, right, that we can sometimes get volcanoes?
Right. So those are called subduction zones. And when certain types of these events happen, it's more likely to cause a volcano. So in certain areas of the world, especially something called the Ring of Fire, this is a very common volcano building environment. So the Ring of Fire is basically all around the Pacific Ocean, goes down along the outsides of all the continents there, and it's like a big circle around part of the Earth. And it's really common to have volcanoes in that area because of how the plates interact with each other.
Okay, so we're going to interact with our lemon now with your spoon. And what you're going to do is you're just going to try and separate that delicious citrus membrane on the inside from the skin. You're going to break it up so it's going to be a little bit juicy. Maybe at this point I'll put it in my little container right here so I don't create a mess. And you're just going to try and break up all of the citrusy membranes on the inside, okay? You want to release that lemon juice. Okay, so the Ring of Fire, we showed a little picture of that, but where do we find, like, what are some places in the world where we find a lot of volcanoes?
Yeah, so there's many different places and many different kinds of volcanoes, and they all have different places that we find them. So I talked about Iceland earlier. That's a lot of volcanoes are in that area, and what's happening there actually is instead of the plates coming together, they're actually coming apart.
What?
That's a rift, and the magma is actually coming up through the crack that's being formed as those plates move apart. Then there's other areas that are a different type of volcano in Hawaii, and those are, we can go into a little bit more later, but those are a different type of volcano. And then there's the Ring of Fire, so all along the Pacific Ocean, the west coast of Canada and the United States, and then going all down the side of South America.
Okay, I know a question
over to Japan.
That a lot of our viewers probably have are there volcanoes in Canada?
They're not volcanoes per se. It's a little bit complicated. So things that aren't erupting currently at the moment, but there's a lot of volcanic history in Canada. So our continent is very old, and we have lots of signatures of these things happening. Not as much in recorded time, but they do exist. A lot of them are dormant.
Okay, so next thing, I've broken up a ton of my lemon. If I lift it up, it'll leak out, so I'm not going to do that. I'm then going to put in blue, because I have a lot of blue. If you have red, that's even better. Just put a little bit of your food coloring into your lemon, okay? And then you can scrunch it up a little bit more. Okay, you said a word earlier. Now I want you to define a few words. Dormant volcanoes, extinct volcanoes, active volcanoes.
So in Canada, we have a few active volcanoes, but I'm not sure if they've actually gone off in recorded history. But so active means in recorded history, we can actually find times when they've erupted, whereas dormant means it's like kind of like it's sleeping. It could go off. It might go off during our lifetimes, or it might go off in 10,000 years. And scientists have ways of tracking when it's likely to go off. And extinct means that it's no longer being supplied with magma. It's no longer going to erupt.
Got it. Okay. So it's possible to live near a volcano and have it never erupt. It's possible to live by one and have it erupt. And it's possible to live by one and maybe. Next thing you're going to do is, this is where we're going to get our eruption, okay? I have, what is this? A teaspoon of baking soda right here. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it into my lemon. I have not practiced this, but I'm pretty sure it's going to work. I'm going to pour my, my baking soda into the lemon, and then it should interact with the lemon juice. Let's see what happens. Whoa! It worked so much better than I thought it would. You see how it's bubbling up like that? I think that kind of reminds me of like a fissure, or maybe how in Iceland, how the plates are coming apart as opposed to like erupting out of a giant volcano at the top, or a mountain at the top. Then sort of just like agitate it. Look at that go. Now this reminds me a little bit of a type of volcano, and we can get into these types now. I call them Hawaiian volcanoes. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Yeah, that's a good name for them.
So Hawaiian volcanoes, typical ones come from Hawaii, and it's actually in Hawaii, it's something called a hotspot track. So there are plumes of magma that exist underneath the crust, and it's constantly bringing up fresh material to the surface that's really hot, and the earth plates are slowly moving over top of that surface. And as that's happening, we're getting these volcanoes on the surface of the earth, and those plates keep moving, and so the volcano itself is actually appearing in different places. So if you look at Hawaii, it's a chain of islands, and those are all where the hotspot has existed underneath the crust for a while. And this type of volcano, it's usually a very slow flowing eruption.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the kind that you would typically have to run away from, although it does happen. And it creates this really ropey lava that's really black and thick. And it one went off in Hawaii not that long ago. It actually created a whole bunch of extra land when the lava met the ocean and cooled off. So sometimes it creates extra land for us.
So volcanoes, what I'm getting from that is like maybe volcanoes aren't always bad, is they can create new like places for us to live.
Mm-hmm. And actually when they erupt, they bring a lot of minerals that would exist deeper in the earth to the surface. And those things are actually very fertilizing for plants and animals and things in the area.
So volcanoes can feel a little bit scary, and I get it, especially if you're living right next to one, but they do really good things. Okay, another volcano is, I call it a Plinian volcano, and we're going to erupt that at the very end of the show with the Coke and Mentos. What's going on with that type of volcano?
So that kind has a lot of ash and rock debris that's very, very fine, erupting into the air and cascading down as dust and material falling down. It's usually a very fast eruption. It's got a lot of energy behind it. Those are the kinds you definitely want to be evacuated away from. All of them you want to evacuate away from. But those are the kinds where they happen quickly. The ash clouds can move very fast when they're coming down. And you typically think of that like big pointy cone type of volcano. That's a very tall volcano. Yeah, like a mountain. Very tall mountain. Whereas Hawaii volcanoes are very flat.
So I'm going to show you a quick pic of one of these Plinian ones erupting. You can see that right there. The other thing is Plinian types of volcanoes are very famous in history because we've all heard about Pompeii, right? And if you were lucky enough to see the Pompeii exhibit at the ROM, made by ROM legend Richard Leahy, now retired, incredible exhibit. But you can see how that one erupts right there. That is wild. So Plinian volcano is what happened in Pompeii. We're going to get ready for our next volcano eruption. We are going to do one that is similar to our Hawaiian eruption that we were just talking about. And what you need is 1 tablespoon baking soda, half a cup of vinegar, 1 tablespoon dish soap, food coloring, and then a beaker. Now, if you really want to go for this, decorate your volcano. This is the classic baking soda and vinegar one. You probably, if you come to ROM Camp, you've definitely done it before. You might have even done it on an earlier episode of this show. So what you need to do is you need to tray to get rid of the lemon. Thank you, producer. There we go. Okay, so what we need to do is you're going to put 1 tablespoon of baking soda into your beaker. All right, you can put a little bit more if you want to. And then you're gonna put a half cup of vinegar inside. Then you're gonna put a tablespoon of dish soap. And then you're gonna put your food coloring, whatever you want. I'm gonna do this right now while we are chatting. Okay, are there any other types of volcanoes?
It's kind of like a spectrum of volcanoes. So it goes from being really flat with very slow moving lava, and then there are types that are a combination of the 2 types of volcanoes, the slow moving volcano and the ones that erupt ash. Then there's the ash kind. There's super volcanoes are another variety that are just very, very large. And generally, when we describe volcanoes, we do it based on the amount of material we think they're going to bring to the surface and the shape that they form at the surface.
Got it. Now, in our pre-interview, we were talking about something really, really cool. It's a Canadian connection. It's a Montreal connection, and if you're a fan of the show, you know I love Montreal. Best bagels come from there. What's the deal with hotspots in Mount Royal?
Yeah, so hotspots like the kind in Hawaii that form those volcanoes, there is a hotspot track system, most likely a hotspot track system, scientific contention, that exists in the Montérégie Hills area of Quebec. So one of those is Mount Royal, where Montreal got its name. And it's actually a series of these hills that are called intrusions. So the magma didn't erupt like a volcano per se. It kind of broke to the surface, but didn't quite get through. And it's Another one is Mount Rome, I think. There's Mount Saint Gregoire. There's quite a few of them. So you can actually go to the Montreal area. It's a little bit outside Montreal too. Do some apple picking, see some amazing former volcanic-y areas. It's a real tourist hotspot, let me tell you, if you like rocks.
Definitely pick up some bagels too for your snack. Okay, we have a question from the chat. We want to know about underwater volcanoes.
Yeah, what would you like to know about them?
So my thinking.
What are they?
Yeah, like what's the deal?
So volcanoes can happen anywhere all over the earth. So some of them will happen underwater. We don't see their effects as much typically until they actually break the height of the water is when you'll start to notice, and then they'll form new islands. But there are many different places where this type of eruptions happen underwater. There are also these things called black smokers, which is where there's like hot fluids and gases that are coming out on the bottom of the ocean, and they're bringing chemicals and heat to the bottom of the ocean, and that's actually a really great place for life to thrive, and you get like all these cool crabs and corals and stuff growing on them. Yeah, so they're important.
More ways that eruptions do really, really important things. Okay, so now we're going to do this eruption because we're doing really well right here, and then we're going to talk about some current events. Okay. Because there's some current volcanic events going on right now. So, as you saw, I put in my tablespoon of baking soda. I then put in my tablespoon of soap. I then put in my blue food coloring because that's just the mood that we have here. And then I have my half cup vinegar. What's going to happen is the vinegar and the baking soda interact, then releasing sort of like bubbles. And with the dish soap in there, it makes those bubbles even bigger. And what it should do is come spewing right out. Now, I'm wondering if I have enough in here for it to come out, so we're going to see what happens, all right? I want to know how your volcanic experiments are going as well. Here we go. Oh, it's coming, it's coming, it's coming. Nice. So this is just like those slow-moving eruptions that Veronica was talking about, kind of like the Hawaiian eruptions too, right? Where they're slow, they come up, and then eventually they can build new land where people can live, all right? If you want to keep exploding that, put a little bit more baking soda in, put a little bit more vinegar in. I like that one. That's so smooth. And oh, that looks beautiful. That's some really good work right there for me. What kind of... Okay, so we have a question about magnitudes, okay?
Yes.
What does that mean? Like, what does that mean?
So usually magnitude relates to earthquakes. And so it gives you a scale of how strong the shaking is occurring on the earth. When we talk about volcanoes and we're describing how strong they are, we use something called, I think it's an explosivity index.
Nice.
And that talks about how explosive it is and how much magma it's going to produce.
And so if you look that up, you'll see that there were some like really gigantic explosions earlier on in the formation of our planet, when our planet was a little bit younger, where some are on like number 10 on the scale, which was quite drastic, incredibly damaging. A wild ride for our Earth. Okay, I'm moving this over because we're going to get ready for our next I'll leave this right here for now. Okay, we are talking about volcanoes and explosive events, and two of them are going on right now. I'm just going to get those ready for us. Can you tell us what's happening in St. Vincent?
Yeah, the St. Vincent one is actually one of those more explosive types of volcanoes. So it last erupted about 40 years ago. It's currently erupting right now, and a bunch of people have had to be evacuated. It's got the potential to be a humanitarian crisis because a lot of people are relying on places for their food and livelihood that's now been disrupted by it because this eruption has brought down so much ash. And if you look at some of the videos of it, it almost looks like it's snowing by how much ash is falling down.
So, you know, this is like a humanitarian crisis. This is a really bad thing for everyone that lives there. And of course, when you pair it with a pandemic, it makes it even more difficult. So, you know, they're all doing the best that they can. So watch out for that and see how you can take part and help. Another one that's a little bit more, that doesn't have the humanitarian crisis attached to it, is what's going on in Iceland.
Yeah, and the Iceland ones, so those are more of the sticky and slow eruptions. There's some really amazing footage, especially at night, of these lava flows. Iceland is a very tectonically active, volcanically active place because it's the middle of the mid-ocean ridge, which is where the Earth is growing apart. And so it brings a lot of magma up to the surface. You can actually stand on two tectonic plates at the same time if you go to Iceland.
What?
The North American and the Eurasian plate. Really cool. Because of that, there's so much magma moving around all over the place. So one started, I want to say it was about 2 weeks ago or so now. I cannot say its name, unfortunately. But it's predicted it's probably going to go off for a few years. And so that maybe by the time tourism comes up again, it might be one that you could go visit.
Okay, did you just say that this eruption is going to just keep happening?
It's theorized. No one knows for certain, but there used to be one that went off in Hawaii for several years until the magma lake eventually cooled and solidified. So there's thoughts that this one's going to be like that too, that you can go visit an active volcano.
That's absolutely wild. That it just keeps going on.
People right now are like grilling hot dogs in it, toasting marshmallows on it. Looks like a lovely time.
I highly do not recommend that, but wow, that sounds so cool. Just the concept that, I guess in my mind, an eruption happens and then it's over. But for it to just keep going on is so cool. Okay, we have another question from the chat. They want to know, are earthquakes and volcanic eruptions related?
They can be, but not all of the time. So you can have earthquakes without eruptions. Usually if you have an eruption, you're going to have some kind of earthquake because there's a lot of material building up. It's causing a lot of pressure, and that pressure needs to release. And before that happens, it's going to cause some shaking. So before the Icelandic eruption just went off, I think they had something like 20,000 minor earthquakes happen in the span of a week. It was a lot. So whenever you have that buildup of pressure, the earth starts trembling, and we can pick it up on different types of seismometers.
That's really cool. I think this will fit. It doesn't quite fit, but it's gonna work. Okay.
You're making a mess.
Yeah, we're gonna make a little bit of a mess here for our elephant toothpaste experience. We have another question from the chat. What kind of volcano is the most destructive or most dangerous?
I think it's hard to say because it depends what it's near. Some volcanoes, they're going to be more destructive if they're right beside where a village is, whereas others like this Icelandic one, this one is not near many things. It's quite isolated. But other ones that have gone off in Iceland that are very similar types have released so much lava that they actually caused a large portion of the Icelandic population to die off, like about 1,000 years ago or so, I think it was. They could be really destructive or not at all, depending on where they're situated, regardless of what type of eruption it is.
It's a great question. We have another interesting question here. Is it true that it's good to have eruptions every so often?
Ooh, good in what way, I guess? It could be good in that it releases some of the pressure so that the next eruption that happens isn't going to be nearly as big. Could also be good that it's bringing more of that fertile mineral material to the surface so that plants and things can refresh the area. Yeah, in some ways.
I think to hit on a couple of those things too, it's dangerous if people live next to that volcano, and if no one's there, then it causes less damage. But what I think is really cool is that, eruptions, they bring up all those minerals, they can make places have more vegetation or be more fertile after an eruption, to that last question. We also heard about those vents underwater where a lot of life can form. So eruptions aren't necessarily a bad thing, but when it comes to a place like St. Vincent right now, that is destructive. Or if you look at Pompeii, that is destructive, okay? So, it really goes to the people that are there. We have a question. I'm gonna ask this question right after I tell you what we're doing next. We are gonna make elephant toothpaste now, okay? I'll explain why elephant toothpaste in a second. What it requires is hydrogen peroxide, okay? So we definitely need a lot of adult supervision and involvement here. I will be putting on gloves because sometimes hydrogen peroxide can not feel good with your skin. And then I will also be wearing, I don't have safety goggles proper here, but I will be wearing my cool guy shades. So keep that in mind. So you need hydrogen peroxide, you need yeast, okay? You need dish soap again, and then you need a container, and you need warm water, okay? I'm using 3% hydrogen peroxide because that's what I have. You can use 6 and the eruption's a little bit bigger. If you use something like 20 or 30%, it's an absolutely giant eruption. So we are doing a calm one. We've been talking about calm eruptions, and we will be doing a calm eruption right here. Okay, while I get all this ready, my question from our audience was, what's a composite volcano?
Ooh, these are going into your science terms. Give me one moment. So the major types of volcanoes, how I traditionally learn them, are shield versus cone. So shield is like a flat volcano, like the Hawaiian ones, and a cone volcano is like you were talking about before, the Plinian eruptions. And if I remember correctly, a composite volcano is a mixture of the two. But I will put my thinking hat on and get to you back with the answer.
That sounds really dangerous. Okay, so while we're putting our thinking hat on, I'm gonna do my first step right here. So we need half a cup of hydrogen peroxide. So I'm gonna pour that out into my little half cup right here.
So a composite, well, before you do that, if I can interrupt already.
Please.
So you know I said I called them shields and cones,
Yeah.
and you called them Hawaiian and Plinian?
Yeah.
So a composite is another name for the Plinian or the cone volcano. And that's why it can get complicated because so many people have so many different terms.
Yeah, and we spent a lot of time talking about that in the pre-one as well. Yeah, I'm gonna put this into a better cup right here. Volcanoes have a lot of terms and language around them. Okay, I'm putting this in here. Now, it's more than just volcanoes that explode. All right?
Yes.
What is a geyser?
Geysers are, instead of buildup of magma, you've got a buildup of steam. So if you think of when you're boiling a teapot and your tea kettle starts to whistle, it's the same kind of idea with a geyser. That steam is blowing off, but sometimes it happens in a really rhythmic, timeable way that'll happen, say, like every 20 minutes. Or there are types of geysers that are very unpredictable and go off whenever they feel like it.
We are showing a video that you took right here of you with a geyser.
Right.
And that looks so cool. It's just this giant eruption of water. Are they dangerous?
They're pretty hot. You don't want to be around a lot of steam, so you definitely stand back from them when they happen. There's another one in Yellowstone called Old Faithful that is quite famous.
That's a famous
The
one.
one that you showed there is in Iceland again, because it's an awesome place.
Let's show that one more time if we can, because that was a really, really cool video. There we go. It just explodes right out of the ground, just like that. It's going to be similar to when we make our Coke and Mentos eruption in just a few minutes. Okay, so my first step right here is I put in my hydrogen peroxide, my 3%. The next thing I'm going to do, I have my warm water right here. I'm going to mix in a teaspoon of yeast. And I'm sure everyone has a ton of yeast in their house because everyone's been making a lot of bread during this pandemic time. So I'm just going to snip this right open. Whoa! Luckily I did it right into the tray, so I'm not going to get in trubs later. I'm pouring my little teaspoon, my teaspoon of yeast right there. Okay, you can see that just like that. I'm then going to mix it into my water. Okay, and it's going to make sort of a paste. All right, so just sort of mix it together because this is the solution that's going to make our hydrogen peroxide react and turn into elephant toothpaste. Okay, another thing that I learned is that there's such a thing called a mud volcano. What the heck is that?
Yeah, so it's like a mixture of stand-in mud and hot steam. So instead of blowing off just gas, you actually get splatterings of mud happening all over the place. You can find some pretty cool videos of them. They're also really hot, so you don't really want to get too close to them. But I was making polenta, or grits is another name for it, the other day, cornmeal, boiling a pot on the stove. very similar thing going on. We've got a really thick bubbling action happening with lots of splatter. Don't want to get close to it because it can burn, but it's a cool thing to watch.
Science happening in the kitchen. Okay, I guess a question that we had in the chat, but I'm also wondering as well, is like, what causes this? Is there pressure somewhere?
It's usually like a buildup of gas and fluid, like hot water. So whenever water circulates throughout deep in the earth, it reaches areas that are hotter than others, and it can start to boil that water. That boiled water gets trapped in some places. It cools down enough a little bit to mix with the materials that are nearby, can liquefy all the sand and dirt, create a mud that just slurries up to the surface in a little bit of an eruption.
I think our friend Ayush says that there's geysers in Yellowstone Park, and you are absolutely correct on that. So you might have just noticed that I did a really interesting thing here. In order to make like the toothpastey effect, what I did is I dabbed my food coloring along the edge so it runs down. I didn't drop it right into the middle. I ran it along the sides, and hopefully that means when it erupts, it'll have a nice little line along the side of it. So I'm going to clear up my space right here, and I'm going to just make some room because it's time for us to do a pretty big eruption. Now, I did it a few times in practice, and it took a while for it to happen. So we're going to see, and while we do that, we can talk about some other things. Putting on my safety goggles, which are really just my cool person glasses. I've mixed it all up, and this is our third of 4 experiments, and I'm now going to pour it in. We're going to see what happens.
So exciting!
Ooh.
Is that a beaker too?
This is, we did use a beaker earlier. This is,
Nice.
it can be a beaker. Not a lot of eruption happening, okay? But it's slowly going at the bottom. If you use a higher percentage peroxide, it reacts bigger, but you can see it's starting to happen. I'm really interested to know what's happening with yours. You can see all that bubbling that's going on as it comes out. And so again, like with a volcano, there's pressure somewhere, there's a reaction somewhere, and then it has to go from its place deeper in the earth out top from one of those cracks where we can eventually have that eruption. Okay.
Yeah, so if you think of like a pot of water boiling on a stove and you put a lid on it, that lid is holding all that pressure in, and it's going to start teetering a little bit. Sometimes you've got a little hole in your pot that'll actually escape through, and that's a very similar thing.
That's so cool. What I'm finding really interesting is I used old yeast, like expired yeast, and that worked better than our yeast that is like, fully ready to go. But it might have to be like we need some more hydrogen peroxide. Let's just do that. What happens if I do this? And it goes a little bit more. I think my base is too wide here. So this is an eruption that happens, and then you know what? It just fizzled out. It just didn't work out in the end.
This happens in real life too.
Okay, so I like that. Thank you for making me feel better about that. Okay, I have one more question for you, and then we're going to do our giant Plinian eruption in our bathroom. What are kimberlites?
So kimberlites are another type of volcano that happened in a very specific time in Earth's history that are actually the mechanism that have brought diamonds to the surface of the Earth. So they only happen in very certain types of rocks. We have some in the Canadian Shield, and they come from very deep-seated parts of the Earth. They erupt to the surface very fast, like a matter of minutes, and they bring up so much material from deep in the Earth that it survives. And so that's how we bring diamonds to the surface. So they're pretty important in that regard because it also helps us understand more about what the interior of our Earth looks like, because it's very hard for us to actually drill down and reach to some of these places. So the rocks up for us to study to figure that out.
Got it.
But they don't happen anymore, which is kind of a good thing because they seem pretty destructive.
Again, the Earth was full of very destructive volcanoes when it was a little bit more active. I think one of the things that I like to think of volcanoes is they're a sign of an active, alive planet.
Yeah, exactly. We want to live on a planet that has volcanoes going on because it means that our planet is alive.
Got it. Okay, with that said, it is time for us to go to the closing act of our eruption episodes. We've done 3, 2 worked great. Our hydrogen peroxide one fizzled out. And that's what sometimes happens with eruptions in real life too. But I'm guaranteeing you that the next one will be quite explosive. Now we're gonna try and move through our house, our tiny little apartment, into the bathroom. So let's hang out. And while we're going along the way, can you tell us a little bit more about supervolcanoes?
So supervolcanoes are like a giant type of volcano. The one that people know most about is the one in Yellowstone, but it's theorized that there's quite a few of them that are probably dormant across the Earth. I forget how long it is since Yellowstone went off, but I want to say it was something like 400,000 years. They bring up, they're one of, in terms of the explosivity index, they're at the highest level. So they'll bring up more material than any other type of volcanic eruption. So whenever they happen, they would be quite damaging to life on Earth, or could change the climate a little bit, bring up a lot more greenhouse gases to the surface and have more of that greenhouse effect, or bring up more clouds, and that would make the Earth a little bit cooler. So yeah, they're a pretty big deal. We don't really know when the next one is going to go off. It's probably not for a while.
A little bit scary, but hopefully not for a while. Okay, for our next project, for our final, our climax of the episode, we have some Diet Coke and we have some Mentos down here, okay? Veronica, I'm really excited for you to see this, and also welcome to my bathroom.
Thanks. This means I'm in the splash zone, right?
Yeah, this does mean you're splashing. Are you ready for this?
I got my goggles.
Nice. Okay, I like this. So what we're going to do is we are using Diet Coke. We prefer using Diet Coke because there's not sugar in it, so it doesn't leave a really sugary residue and sticky residue wherever you're doing this. Whether it's in the backyard, maybe in a classroom, or in a tub like us. Now, I also want to highlight a hack that friend of the show, Rhea, taught me. You can see the Mentos, I've taped them, okay? So they all go in together. Because it can be really hard to drop all the Mentos into your pop, your Diet Coke, all at once, all right? So if you tape them together, they go in a little bit easier. Essentially, the Diet Coke and the carbonation in the inside reacts with the surface of the Mentos, which causes an eruption. And hopefully ours is big enough. We're only using a 1 liter bottle, but 2 liter bottles, whoa, those are really something. So I'm gonna open up my little Diet Coke. This type of eruption is most similar to a Plinian eruption, again, the type that happened with Pompeii, or a geyser, and that they shoot up. These are the fast moving ones. So, yeah. Veronica, I'm moving you over so you can see.
Exciting, thank you very much.
I got my Mentos right here, and I'm gonna drop them right in, okay? 3, 2, 1. Nice, see how it just comes up? Oh, Veronica, it wasn't high enough for you to see all of it, but you can see the after effects of that right there, okay?
Oh, yeah.
I think I'm so used to doing 2 liter bottles that I'm just expecting that giant eruption.
But this is good. Now you don't have a huge mess to clean up.
No. Now, you can drink this if you want after. Just don't drink the tape, all right? Maybe take your time. Maybe pour it into something else. This was our explosive episode, our special April break Thursday edition of the ROMKids Show. Oh, we got another question right here. Oh, thank you. My apron does rock. Can dormant volcanoes become active again?
They can, and they do. But sometimes they haven't been active enough in a period of time that we've recorded for us to know when that'll happen. So it makes it harder to predict, but it can happen.
There you go. So lots of unpredictableness that can come with volcanoes. I think it's really important that we recognize that if people live near a volcano that is active, it can be dangerous. And so you need to be prepared for things like that. But that they can cause humanitarian crisis. It's important that we as a community, as a society, support people affected by these drastic events. We also know that volcanoes can happen in places where there's no one around, and it can lead to really good things. It can make places more fertile, and it can allow for life to happen. And most importantly, volcanoes are a sign that our planet is active and alive. And planets that are active can maybe, at least in our case, ended up, we have life in the end with us here. And so maybe that can happen elsewhere in the universe. Geologist Veronica Di Cecco, thank you again for joining us on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
We always have.
I love the eruption.
Oh, thank you. All of these episodes will be up. Today's episode will be up on YouTube later this week. So if you are watching in a classroom or your house later on, hello and howdy. Thank you for joining us. We've had so much fun being able to have extra shows with you this April break. We hope that you enjoy the rest of your time. Thank you again for all your eruptions. I want to see pics if you have them. And with that said, bye everyone, stay safe, wear a mask, we love you, and see you next Tuesday when the ROMKids Show returns. Bye friends.
Bye.